Hello, my name is Reese Ashcraft, and today I'm going to be giving a presentation on older adults in media. Um, so let's hop right into it. So, one of the portrayals that I wanted to go over first is actually a bit of a humorous one, but it is from SpongeBob. So, as a little bit of context to this portrayal, Patrick says some sort of a disparaging remark about old people, to which SpongeBob replies, "What do you mean, Patrick? Old people are the greatest. They're full of wisdom and experience." And I think that this key concept is one that I wanted to specifically talk about because it's a common stereotype or trope found throughout media, frankly, found throughout written and digital media, that old people are full of wisdom and experience. And to illustrate this, I wanted to talk about the hero's journey. Now, we've all learned about the hero's journey. It's talked about in middle school and high school, and its idea that there is an archetype of the old man who becomes a mentor figure for the young hero. And I feel that this most accurately depicts what I'm trying to say. Figures such as Gandalf in Lord of the Rings or Yoda or Obi-Wan in Star Wars are often portrayed as these older individuals whose wisdom and experience can guide youth on their quest to achieve their full self. And the truth of the matter is that older people are in fact a wealth of knowledge, wisdom, and experience. Um, it's interesting because in another kids show, and I think kids shows do have a lot of uh, wisdom in them. One of them says that experience outranks everything, and it's this notion that older people do have a lot of life experience that can help guide and direct younger individuals, which I think is actually a very helpful stereotype. Well, I guess helpful trope would be more accurate because I think there's this prevailing concept that old people are, or older people are out of touch, that they don't know what it's like to live and to grow in the time period that we're in, which I think is fundamentally false. Because a lot of the life experience and wisdom that older individuals have to share is applicable, um, frankly, even though the internet's around, when it might not have been when they were kids. And a class concept that we can connect this to is the idea of self theory. Now, self theory obviously encapsulates a lot of different theories, but here's a definition: theories of late adulthood that emphasize the core self, or the search to maintain one's identity and integrity. And I think the reason why that specific definition jumped out at me is because older individuals have, in some ways, completed that search, that they've found their identity, they've found who they are, they've connected to their core self through the life experiences that they've had and the wisdom that they've gained from it. As I did my own research, a website after website express this notion that one of the benefits and one of the things to look forward to as you get older is this idea that you're secure in who you are. And I believe that a lot of that confidence comes through experience. So, media portrayal number two is Good Will Hunting. For those of you who have not seen the movie, the character who I'm going to be specifically mentioning is Robin Williams' character. Now, in the movie, the character Robin Williams is portraying is this older, kind of beat down therapist. And as he interacts with the main character, the protagonist, you come to find out that one of the main reason he has kind of given up a little bit on life is because his wife passed away. And throughout the movie, it kind of evokes this concept or this stereotype that older people have lived their life and are now essentially burdens on others. The term washed up comes to mind. And as the movie progresses and as Robin Williams' character interacts with the protagonist, he comes to realize the truth that there is still a lot more that he has to offer, even though different parts of his life have come to a close. And that's the truth that I want to talk about, that older people are not doomed to become frail or washed up. A study in our textbook, one of the key concepts from it states that senescence is inevitable, but no, frailty is not. And it's this idea that there is much life that can still be lived by older individuals, even as families and careers wind down. That as spouses and other family members die, as you retire, as a lot of the purpose in your life begins to change, that doesn't mean that your life is over. And this really heavily connects to the class concept of integrity versus despair. And this is the direct definition from the textbook. The final stage of Erik Erikson's developmental sequence in which older adults seek to integrate their unique experiences with their vision of the community. I think that this is a powerful, powerful, powerful statement. And the reason why I say that is because essentially what it's saying is that engaging with the community is the direct antithesis of despair. Or to shorten it even further, engagement is the antithesis of despair. And I find that powerful, that as older people continue to age, that to avoid sinking into despair, they need to engage with others, both physically and mentally, that they need to still exercise their minds, that they need to be involved. And yeah, media portrayal number 3. This one I thought this was actually the most funny of the 3, but it's the portrayal of President Biden and Trump. For those of you who aren't plugged into the news, there have been a ton of different news articles, and there still are news articles that are very critical of the presidents because of their old age. I want to start off by saying that I do think that age does bring its challenges, as health declines and as different things happen. But I think that these news articles perpetuate a stigma that elderly individuals cannot contribute to society because their age has robbed them of that privilege. I think this is extremely counterproductive and frankly untrue, and I'll get into that in the next slide. The truth is that older adults can still contribute loads to society. One statistic that I'm sure isn't super surprising is that most of the voting is done by people 60 and up. But one that I found that was a lot more powerful to me was that during the pandemic, baby boomers, or people between the ages of 60 and 78, performed the most informal service by age bracket. And this study defined informal service as service that wasn't done like in a charity. They didn't go to a food bank or what have you. It was service done to a neighbor, to a friend, to a nearby family member. And I think that this statistic is very powerful because it directly counteracts this idea that as people become older, they become leeches on society, or they become hermits, or especially during COVID, that they, wore masks and secluded themselves. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of the good that's done in our community and our society is done by older adults. And so I thought it was very powerful. and I wanted to point that out. And to kind of finish it off, a class concept that we talked about is the idea of frailty. Um, and I think, as I mentioned earlier, this kind of connects with the Good Will Hunting analysis, but to prevent frailty, older people need to be engaged physically and mentally. Um, and I think that part of that engagement comes with responsibility. I think that people, as they get older, just because they've gotten older doesn't mean they cannot shoulder responsibility. I think we've seen and we've read about in class how important grandparents are in helping raise children and in helping families during early stages of development. And I think that responsibility can also cascade out into public service, all the way up to and including being the president. And the last part of the presentation I want to touch on was my interview with my grandmother. Um, she had some pretty interesting things to say, and I've got a couple of quotes from our conversation that I'm going to extrapolate on a little bit more. But something interesting that she said was, "How come all the people my age look so old?" And I thought that was a kind of an omen of what was to come in our conversation, because even though she is, 73 years old, she still has a lot of life left in her, and that, seeing other people her age kind of shocked her and seeing how old they were. But specifically as it pertains to the three media portrayals I spoke of. Number one, they're I guess the second quote, but the first of the media portrayals is some people get old and have experiences but don't learn anything from them. And I think that was an interesting concept on media portrayal one, the one about SpongeBob saying that older people have wisdom and experience. And I think it was spot on for our class. Obviously, as we've been doing a lifetime development course, we've learned that development doesn't stop when you hit puberty or when you finish puberty or when you turn 25 or et cetera, that development occurs over a lifetime. And she was quick to point out that older people still have and need to have the capacity to learn and develop. And so just because somebody's 70 doesn't mean they're not going to have more experience and more wisdom. The second thing that we talked about, obviously, was second media portrayal of Good Will Hunting. And a quote that she said was, "You still have the strength to get better." And I thought that was really powerful. That essentially what she was saying was that it's not all downhill from here. That as family members and spouses and, work, as all these things come to a close in some degree or another, that it doesn't have to mean that it's all downhill from here. And the last one was, "Ability matters more than age." And she related a story to me that I thought was kind of interesting. A relative of ours, she passed away when she was about 100, or when she was 100 years old. And up until the day she died, she had a sound mind about her. She was sharp, quick-witted, she still had her wits about her. And my grandma kind of talked about how it's interesting how you can have a 100-year-old who still has their mind about them like that, but then you can have a 75-year-old who, for whatever reason, whether it's dementia or some other related cause, no longer have their mind about them. And she was quick to point out that your ability to do something matters a lot more than your age. And I found that to be a powerful reminder and a powerful truth that I wanted to point out. So yeah, that's my presentation. I hope you learned a little something about how older people are portrayed in media and about the truth of the aging process, that it doesn't have to mean that you become frail or you sink into despair or become a hermit or become crotchety and old, but that instead it's just another phase or development of life, and that it brings with it unique challenges and circumstances, just like other phases of life, that allow us to continue to grow and develop. And real quick, as I end the presentation, here are some references.